Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be ranking the most recommended fantasy romance books. I have watched dozens of fantasy romance recommendations videos. I have 194 recommendations in a spreadsheet, and I tallied every time the same book title was mentioned to compile it ended up being the top 13 most recommended fantasy romance books. I have read some of these, others I have not. I'll be telling you a little bit about these books, if I've read them, my thoughts. And I will link some of my go-to YouTube channels for fantasy romance recommendations in my description box. I would also love it if in the comments you can leave your thoughts on any of these books, or if you have any additional recommendations, I would love to hear them. I am 100% in my Romantasy era. What will not be included on this list is anything Sarah J. Maas. I am a Throne of Glass, ACOTAR, and Crescent City stan. She is 100% the most recommended author especially when you're first getting into fantasy romance. Obviously those three series would most likely hold the top 3 spots in this ranking, so I've just excluded them. If you have not yet read any Sarah J. Maas series, I do recommend those. I love all 3 so much. And hopefully by the end of the year I will have read through this entire list, but I'm going to stop rambling now and let's start off with spot 13. In 13th place, which is last in this ranking, but like I said, this is spot 13 out of 194, so definitely very recommended. This is The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. These books were popular for a long time, and this series is 4 books, but kind of 2 duologies that go hand in hand. I have yet to read this, but clearly I own the physical copy, so it's a top priority for me to read. This is an arranged marriage trope in which our female main character, Lara, L-A-R-A, has been trained to be a lethal spy. She has an arranged marriage to the Bridge Kingdom, but she has the mission to bring that kingdom to its knees. So this also has a bit of that enemies to lovers vibe. I'm going to try and get this on my October TBR. In spot 12, we have the Plated Prisoner series. Now I'm holding up Guild. I have actually read the first 3 books in this series. I've read Guild, Glint, and Gleam. It has been quite a while since I've returned to this series. The books just get bigger and bigger, and I kind of needed a break, but this series is very intriguing to me. It is a King Midas retelling, and we are following Orin, who is a woman that is completely gold. The story is that King Midas turned her to gold. Her hair is gold, her skin is gold, everything about her is gold except for that she's still a completely moving person, not a solid statue. This first book just skims the surface, and really after I liked this book, I didn't love it. Continuing on with the series, I like the books more and more. When we get introduced to more characters, things start getting exciting. The magic in the world in here, actually this series would be perfect to read in the winter time. It's a very cold climate. I should really return to this series and finish it out because I think the last book in this series is due to come out at the end of this year. I was not expecting Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout to still be so recommended. I know this kind of fell in line when ACOTAR really started to pick up speed, especially on Book Talk a couple years ago, and Blood and Ash was right along with that, but the series kind of fell off for me, and I feel like for a lot of people as well, but it's having a bit of a resurgence. So this series goes hand in hand with the Flesh and Fire series. There is a specific reading order, but first you read the first 3 books in the Blood and Ash series. And I really, really enjoyed this first book. We have a lot of paranormal type characters. There is the bodyguard trope in here. Very exciting. We're following Poppy and Castile. Poppy is the maiden. She has to keep her body completely hidden. She must be pure, and she's going to be sacrificed to the goddess. And Castile is her new bodyguard, and a romance ensues. Now, these books are very long, very descriptive. Loved this book and then liked each book of the first 3 less and less, but this is another series I would really like to return to. Next book I need to read is the first Flesh and Fire, which I've seen so many people raving about, and I know I'm going to love that one. These books, both this series and the series that goes along with it, the prequel series, definitely have Touch Her and Die vibes, stabby main characters. It's pretty exciting. This is the first wild card of this list. I was really not expecting this to make it to the top 10, and that is Radiance by Grace Draven. I have heard of this book for many years, but it didn't seem super popular until I went on this rabbit hole of watching so many recommendations videos, and this was recommended again and again and again as being some people's like underhyped favorite fantasy romance. This is another arranged marriage trope, and our main characters are from 2 different species, and they think the other is absolutely so ugly, so repulsive, they can't ever imagine falling in love with them, let alone being attracted to them. But of course, as we know that this is a fantasy romance, we get there in the end. I've heard this goes from not necessarily enemies to lovers, but like strangers who find each other repulsive, then they become friends, find some common ground, things that they can connect over, and eventually to lovers, and that is very intriguing to me. Blood and Steel by Helen Schurer. This is the first book in the Legends of Thesmar series, another series I have yet to begin. This, on Goodreads it says it is an epic romantic fantasy with enemies to lovers, slow burn spice, found family, and a sprawling world of magic and monsters. And I have seen this cover on, you know, those YouTube recommendations that are like favorite stabby female main characters or badass female main characters, and all of those just tick all my boxes. I think I'm going to absolutely love this series. In this world, women are not supposed to wield a blade. They think that that is going to fulfill this negative prophecy and bring death foretold among them. But our main character, Althea, is determined to become a warrior. I'm not sure how all that is going to come about based on the prophecy and how this society is built in this world, but I'm really excited to get started on that. In 8th place, we have A Court This Cruel and Lovely by Stasia Stark. While I have not read this book yet, you will be seeing it in an upcoming reading vlog. This is the first book in the Kingdom of Lies series. This is a 4-book series. The key tropes of this book are reluctant allies, enemies to lovers, slow burn. That just sounds so good. I'll just read the first little bit on Goodreads. It says, "For years when I fell asleep, I dreamed of a man with blazing green eyes and a cruel smile. The day I met him, this ruthless mercenary leaves me for dead." And then somehow, I mean, reluctant allies is one of the trope call-outs, so they must have to team up together. And there is a warning on here that says this is a new adult/adult romantasy book with steam. While this series is slow burn, the chili pepper rating will increase with each book. I do love some spice in my romantasy books, but it needs to be balanced with plot, world building, characters, It all needs to be working together. You know what I mean? Next up, Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. I would have read this so much sooner, but it did get picked up by a traditional publisher and has gone through some pretty serious edits, so I wasn't able to get my hands on it anymore. I'm not sure if it has come out yet or not, but I will be reading this as soon as I'm able. This is a epic fantasy with dragons, which we love. Princess, prisoner, runaway, queen. Elowyn came into the world like a firestorm made flesh. A princess with a link to 5 dragons should have been a blessing to her kingdom, but her blessing became her curse. I think that her father becomes threatened by how powerful his daughter is to become and kind of imprisons her, removes her from her dragons. I believe that she escapes and forms an army to take back what is rightfully hers. This sounds so exciting. Next up in spot number 6 is A Dawn of Onyx, or the Sacred Stones series. 2 books are out in the series so far, and while I know this is a very hyped book, maybe I have a bit of an unpopular opinion. I have read A Dawn of Onyx twice, and it's just not a favorite for me, but tons of people love it, so let's chat about it. We are following our female main character, Arwen, who is from the Amber Kingdom, and she gets kidnapped or captured, I suppose, as a prisoner of war for the Onyx Kingdom. And there she meets the Dark King. She is a healer, so she helps out at this outpost to heal their soldiers, etc. And allegedly this is an enemies to lovers, but I didn't really buy into that personally. I love the scary forest that surrounds the Onyx Kingdom. There are some really interesting creatures in those woods, and the scene with the Chimera, I'm not going to spoil anything, is probably my favorite scene. I think about that often. I did end up giving this book 3.5 stars, by the way. Like, it's a fun time, but it's definitely just not my favorite. I just feel like Arwen went from a prisoner of war to being able to do whatever the heck and bob she wants way too easily, and she was never really enemies with the King of Onyx, except for just in theory because he's at war with her kingdom. You know what I mean? Next up we have Heavenly Bodies by Imani Iru. This is a celestial romantasy, which I don't think I've ever read before, and I'm super intrigued. The tropes for this book are also reluctant allies, enemies to lovers, but also fated mates. There is a prophecy in this book that our female main character, Alara, will fall for a star, which are stars kind of like god-like beings, I'm not really sure, and that it will kill them both. And I believe her fated mate kills her entire family and then is like, there, we don't have to worry about the prophecy anymore because there's no way someone could fall in love with the being that killed their entire family. But I'm not sure how that's all going to come together. But as with many of these books, I'm certainly intrigued. Spot number 4, Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I have actually started this book. I am buddy reading this with It's Just Steph. I can have her linked below as well. This is a fantasy romance, but it's definitely different vibes from anything else I think I have shared with you so far. This has more of an historical fiction kind of feel with like a magical realism bit. Kind of, like that's the feel of the book as you're reading it, but I mean there's a war going on here in which it's 2 gods fighting. So like the gods are very prevalent in this world, yet it reads just very historical fiction. And we are following Iris and Roman, and they both work at this newspaper, and they are fighting for the same promotion. Now, Iris's brother Forrest enlisted to go fight in the war on with one of the gods, and she is writing these letters to him on her typewriter, and she puts them into her wardrobe, and then the letters are disappearing. So she thinks that there's some magic involved and that they are being sent somehow to her brother. But apparently the letters are being sent to Roman, and he has figured it out that the letters are coming from Iris, but she has no idea. I have just barely started this. I started it earlier today, and I'm already loving the writing style. I think that this is going to be just a lovely story. We have made it to the top 3, and in 3rd place is another wild card, one I was not expecting to be so recommended, and that is Blood Mercy by Bella Roth. These are super chunky, super epic vampire romances. I put vampire in quotation marks because they are a little bit different. They are called Hesperines, but they're definitely vampire-like beings. These books are absolutely massive. The first book is nearly 800 pages. A lot of the books in this series, in order to be printed physically, needed to be split into 2 parts. And I know that this is definitely a very different writing style from any of the other books I have shared with you today. It definitely has that epic fantasy feel. There's lots of description happening in here, lots of world building, and I actually think that I'm going to devour this book once I get my hands on it. One human, one immortal. Where will their alliance save the kingdom, or will their forbidden love be a death sentence? So our 2 love interests are forbidden to be together, and this is a very slow building romance. I cannot wait. In 2nd place, we have to give it to The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I have finally read this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. And when I say I love Romantasy, this is what I mean. I was so intrigued by the world building. The plot was super fast paced and interesting to me, and the romance is something that I could swoon over. Like, all the building blocks for a fantastic fantasy romance were here for me. I really, really enjoyed it. I like the fresh take on vampires. In this, we have our main character who is a human, and she has been adopted by the current vampire king, and no one really knows why, but she is constantly in danger, being surrounded by vampires. They can hear her pulse. She has to have bodyguards to protect her from any of the vampires who can just slip into like bloodlust and not be logical, even though everyone knows that the king will absolutely destroy them if they lay a finger on his adopted daughter, but sometimes they can't help themselves. And so Araya joins in on these trials because the winner will get to make a request from the goddess of night, and whatever they want, whatever they ask for, they can get. Along the way, she has a reluctant ally with Rain, who is a vampire, and they team up to help each other move through these trials, but they know once they reach the end, one of them is going to have to win out over the other, and the tension and build-up and romance between these 2 and the ending of this book, I was completely sucked in. I love this. I cannot wait to continue on with this series. I definitely understand why this is so highly recommended. And lastly, you're not going to be surprised in who is number 1, especially knowing that I had to take Sarah J. Maas out of the running because she would for sure be in the top, fill the top 3 spots. If we exclude Sarah J. Maas, the other clear winner is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This book is very polarizing, and yet it's constantly recommended as being a good fantasy romance especially for beginners. And this was my favorite book of last year, of 2023. I loved it, had so much fun. This is a military school setting. We have dragons. This is brutal, so engaging. I think this book is so much fun. We have an enemies to lovers romance as well. And same with The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I found the world building very interesting, the characters, the plot, and the romance. This just kept me sucked in the entire time, right from the beginning. I was tempted to read it again immediately upon finishing, which is not something I say very often. So I'm sure nobody is surprised that Fourth Wing is our winner, but I was surprised by a couple of the fantasy romance books on this list. Were you surprised by any of these? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like I mentioned in the intro, in my ideal La La Land, I would love to have read through all of these by the end of this year, but more realistically, it's going to be to continue / potentially finish the series in this list that I have already started. I feel like that would be smart. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, if you want to push me to read any book in particular, you can let me know that as well. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up so that I know, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!